XDefiant is now out of that last playtest and back into the waiting game for the game's full release. When that will be, we don't quite know, but it's sometime upcoming, and if reports are to be believed, it's eyeing another summer release window here, hopefully for real this time around. But deja vu and the potential memes of "I'll see you in another year" for the launch out of the way, I think there's an important discussion to be had about the hurdles still facing this game. Yes, it's awesome that we're getting a free-to-play arcade shooter, no cost to us that we can grind out. Yes, it's awesome that an industry that prioritizes skill-based matchmaking and player retention as much as it does is now going to have a game that doesn't focus on that. Yes, it's awesome to have any sort of competition in an industry that can push all parties involved to hopefully be better and create a better product for the players. But beyond that, like actually beyond the surface, what keeps you around? Today, I want to discuss a few things that I'm hoping to see in the future for XDefiant as a bigger picture thing. So drop your thoughts, drop a like, and subscribe for more XDefiant and other FPS coverage. But for now, let's get into it. Firstly, the biggest thing, replayability. What brings you back to the game? That's the probably biggest thing that live service games have to contend with because, well, especially in the case of XDefiant, seasons are looking to be every 90-ish days for that first year that's been laid out. Now, granted, we're a year behind that schedule of what was initially planned, but it still seems like the seasons are going to last about 3 months here, where we'll end up seeing maps, a faction, some weapons, and stuff like that. But 90 days is a lot of time to lose out on players. You check that content rollout, 3 maps in 3 months, a few weapons, you're getting like 1 update every single month. But we'll come back to that. Beyond that, what incentive is there to rank up and grind? Is there a cap on our level? With prestiges in the future, will that be something? Are there going to be prestige rewards? What kind of mastery grind is there for camos? The beta showcase levels 100, 200, and 300 for standard bronze, silver, and gold camos, which will no doubt be a heck of a grind, but is there anything beyond that? Will there be a faction mastery, something additional to grind out that you can earn for doing all that? Seasonal mastery, perhaps, to introduce a new level of mastery each season, Obsidian style from like Modern Warfare 2019, where later on in the year they added another incentive to grind out. We just don't know, but that is imperative stuff to keep a player base long-term and keeping them engaged organically, always having something to do, which kind of then leads to the post-launch support, how that will be handled. Seasonal content, obviously we know will be coming in the way of a couple of things per season, but will there be seasonal events in between? Seasonal rewards? That previously detailed plans for the content drop sees about a drop per month almost, unless they do things at like a different pace where maybe it's a map 2 weeks later, a weapon 2 weeks after that, another map, and so on, where it's kind of staggered. But you have 2 different outcomes there. Number 1, a larger drop of content with a larger gap period in between, or 2, less content with a smaller gap period in between, dropping more frequently though. We already see that from seasonal launch to reloaded for Call of Duty's perspective, the player retention drops off, and that's natural. I personally think that this year has better managed that type of drop off with incentives to play in regards to like camo challenges or cool LTMs that you'll see pop up in between, but the general story is that you'd see increased play for like a week or 2 after a large update. It'll tail off. You'll see a bit of a bump mid-season in that update there, and then trail off again until the next seasonal update, and in this case, new content update. Doing things in spurts of like 3 months is going to be different, maybe complicate things in a direct comparison to how we may be able to just theorize how it works, but the core question still applies. How do you keep people coming back, playing through those downsides? Beyond just content, what about weapons and faction balancing, meta adjustments? We saw that there were still a ton of weapons that were dominant in this last playtest that were dominant in the beta and the playtest back in September. So is there going to be stuff that we see regular weapon balancing to shake things up? Because if you're not introducing a whole ton of weapons at any given time, you have a span of 3 months here, that's still plenty of time that you could artificially increase usage of different weapons rather than just having the same static weapons always being the same best weapons. You see that happen a lot with COD as well. Can we get continual foundational improvements? Netcode, hit detection, can that stuff be improved here over time? Obviously, as we saw with this server test, it was not perfect, far from it, but can they create better environments on the fly in the future so that we can end up having those improvements but not have to sacrifice any playtime? Like, is it going to be something that can be adjusted on the fly instead of having to wait until the very end of September in that end of summer time frame where it's just like, okay, we had to take as much time as possible to get this, but now that's where we're at. Beyond any content, any sort of balancing or updates in that sense, one thing that has to be there and is integral to the success of the game is a good anti-cheat. Obviously, as we've talked about plenty of times, free-to-play is awesome because it opens up the availability for anybody to try the game out. You could find your favorite game here with absolutely no risk. There could be a game that could be a perfect match for you, but if it's $50, $60, $70 down the line, you don't quite know if that's going to be your cup of tea. And honestly, that's a lot of money to end up just giving it a shot. So for something to be free to play and having no barrier of entry, that's going to entice a lot more players to end up playing the game, bring in a lot more players on a regular and continual basis. But at the same time, if somebody gets banned for something, well, they can just create a new account. There's no barrier of entry there once again. So as we've talked about plenty of times, cheating goes hand in hand with free to play. So you need something to combat that, something that actually works and does well enough that it doesn't hurt the player base at large. I don't think you're ever going to find a 100% flawless anti-cheat, but it has to be something that works, and on top of that, there needs to be consistent ban waves going out regularly, not something that like, yeah, okay, maybe a couple of people slip through, but if a few hundred, few thousand players are doing this regularly for months at a time before any action is taken, well, that's a huge problem still. So you need something to work and something to work as well as possible. Also, be more strict with those kind of bans. Make it something that is hardware ID bans. I know there are spoofers out there, but just like go as deep as you can to make it as annoying as possible for any repeat offenders to try and jump back into it. I don't think you or I would have any issue if you make their lives living hell. And beyond that, business-wise, how do you balance revenues without becoming egregious? That is something that with free-to-play is also something you have to take into consideration. Obviously, it is something that the studio has to pay the bills. They have to keep the lights on, got to pay their teams. They got to do that so that the game can keep getting supported. But with no upfront cost of buying that game, well, you're relying on microtransactions and in-game purchases. Not even to point the finger at the team crafting XDefiant at Ubisoft San Francisco, but like Ubisoft as a whole, not a spotless track record by any means. In fact, their newest title, which I was really stoked for, Star Wars Outlaws, I was really frustrated to see that there are entire missions, literally a chunk of the game that's locked behind a higher cost version of the game. Obviously, microtransactions are going to be a thing with an XDefiant. Again, no upfront cost generating any revenue. So where's that balance come from? Can we see individual items like camos or gun skins as opposed to $20 to $30 bundles of stuff that you don't really care about? Will it truly just be simply cosmetic stuff that only looks cool on your guns and stuff like that? Or will they start to push more and more things? That's that balance that really needs to be struck and is very important to keeping a player base engaging with that, but also not going over the top. So those are some of the most important topics I think that we need to think about and hopefully see some answers and good answers at that over the coming weeks to months here ahead of the XDefiant launch. But those are just still some of my points of contention and some hurdles I think that the game has to overcome by the time of that launch. So here's my thing. I know XDefiant isn't for everybody. Yes, it may have missed this window. Yes, it may have lost its opportunity to capitalize on people who wanted what COD was not giving last year. Yes, it may be a clunkier version of a shooter, not as refined, whatever, but it can still find its own way. Whether or not you or I are part of that future doesn't matter. The discussion here was solely focused on the future of XDefiant at large. I know everyone loves to say it's DOA and it'll never release, but it's clearly going to release at some point. Is it perfect? No. God, no. No game ever is. But I had fun. I allowed myself to have fun last weekend with the playtest when it was available. So cautiously optimistic and just looking towards these points of contention and things that I'm hoping to see fixed out by that time as points that I just want to bring up. So that is where we're going to wrap it up. Just want to fill you guys in on some discussions here about the future of XDefiant at large, not necessarily right now going up until the launch of the game, but some stuff that I think bigger picture, really, I think communication and transparency on would be huge. But let me know your thoughts down below. Is there anything you would add to this list? Anything you'd like to add to this discussion? Whatever the case, drop your thoughts down below. But if you enjoyed the video, you found it at all insightful, do me a favor and drop a like on it. And if you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss a single thing regarding all things XDefiant and other FPS content. I'd love to have in the community. But for now, thanks so much for watching. My name is Espresso. I'll see you later. Take care and peace.